Hello and welcome to an episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today we have back on a previous guest, Tobias Hunger, who's here to talk about Slint 1.0, which they just said 1.0. Tobias, how you been?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. We're just talking before the show about how last time you were nervous, now you're still nervous about being on the podcast. I mean, it's sorry to call you out, but you're already a veteran. I think we have very few returning people. Maybe you'd be the only one, actually. I can't think of anybody else who's come back on the podcast besides, of course, the hosts. So maybe you should be honored.
Oh, I feel honored to be invited back, yes.
And pressured being the first one, right? So it's got to be a good episode.
Yeah. You're not helping with my nervousness.
Well, sometimes you have to jump in before, you've learned how to swim, right? Usually the only way to learn how to swim is to jump into the water and kind of hope for the best, or you get saved, right?
Oh, I'm sure it will work out somehow.
Yeah, but number one, I'm happy to see that you stayed at the company. Not trying to say that I thought you were going to leave, but nowadays, if you stay longer than 9 months, it could be an issue, right? So I don't know. Or the company, goes belly up. No need to put any bad luck on you guys, but lately, the economy's not been that great, and I'm happy to see that you guys are still around and you're still there.
Well, last time I've been only with the company for 5 months, so it's just a bit over a year now.
Yeah.
That's not too long.
Well, and you're pretty happy to stay there, I suppose, right? So.
Oh yeah, it's great fun. I mean, doing open source development all day long in Rust is the dream come true.
So actually, let's kind of roll back, if you don't mind, because Slint also the name of the company, if I remember correctly, or it's a different name?
Well, the company name is 60 FPS. So that's what we used to be called before we renamed ourselves, like last year, before the last show.
Yep.
But the company name stays that way because it's hard to rename companies over here in Germany. So we just left it.
And how is it like working at 60 FPS from when we first talked to now? Have things changed? Have you guys grown?
We have grown a bit. We have a new coworker who joined in September.
Only one new coworker?
So far, yes. Yes, growing slowly and organically.
Oh, that's good. You don't want to grow too fast. That's what happened to the big layoff. I think, is there a name for that one? The Great Layoff? I don't know what that was, where everybody in these big tech companies was getting laid off.
I have no idea.
They should have a name for that. But no, it's good that you don't grow too fast, right? Because that could be a huge issue. So you said this person is doing what exactly? They're also programming too?
Oh, they're also programming. They are mostly involved in UI things. So basically designing new demos. And he's really good at Florian has a real hand for this graphical design, which is something I unfortunately do lack a bit. So right now he's working on a virtual keyboard support and other things.
But he's also doing a little bit of design too, you said? Or he's just good at design?
He's really good at design, I think. So he did some demos and likes to work on widgets themselves and add some new things here and there. So he does a really great job.
That's good. It's good to have somebody with some design sense to help out with the demos, because those are what's going to get, that would get the clients, right?
Yep.
Now, how about 60 FPS in terms of their own clients? Because obviously you're doing consulting to kind of help get these solid and moving forward, right?
So we are mostly a product company. So we do have a couple of customers, and of course we do help those. And their problems, of course, also drive the product a bit. Mm-hmm. But we don't do services per se. So
you're saying that the clients that you have right now are basically using this software now, or they're using something else because you said products?
They're using Slint as a tool for their UIs.
Okay.
Most of them are in the embedded space, which do have some small hardware, sometimes running Linux, sometimes bare metal, and they just do UIs with Slint on that. Okay.
So how have things changed regarding Slint from when we first talked to now? I mean, it's been quite some time, right?
Oh, we made huge progress. So we have basically a very good embedded story now. We have demos running on a Raspberry Pico microcontroller without any operating system and less than 300 kilobytes of RAM. And I've always enjoyed showing that demo to people because it has such a wow factor. We also did a bit of work for desktop integration, but there's still more left to do in that area. So basically, we made all-around progress. And the most important part is that we are pretty confident in our architecture by now. So since last time we spoke, I think we did something like 20 releases with a really great compatibility story without breaking too many things for our users. And that's basically why we decided to go for 1.0, because we're now confident that we have something that's stable, that we can build upon without breaking changes. And of course, it's not perfect product yet. So we do have a couple of things where we are still lacking. We are not up to date with toolkits from other languages that have like several decades of the development in them. But we are very confident that we can build on what we have now and catch up.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I'm just looking at the history, right, on the blog. You go from 0.34 to 1.0. It doesn't seem like a lot of work. I mean, was there just a couple of updates in there that were really big? Or has it really just been, since the beginning, there's been a pretty, you're just almost there?
Well, so the basics have been pretty stable for a very long time. So we did not break our API too heavily, even when going from 1.0 to 1.2 and 1.2 to 0.3. For 1.0, we did change a couple of things. We improved the language in a couple of places, made it easier to maintain, make it more explicit in some places. And that's why it's a big compatibility break, kind of. So that's the biggest we ever had. And now that this is in, we are hoping to keep it stable for a while longer.
Yeah. So how do you guys figure out when you're ready to say, okay, this is 1.0? Like, what was the kind of point? Because, I mean, you can just keep going on, like you said. It's been pretty good for a while, right?
That's a philosophical question.
Well, I'm hoping for a philosophical answer.
Yeah, so we are confident in the architecture we have and the design we have so far. We are confident that we can fill in the missing bits and pieces without breaking that. I mean, of course, we could have sticked around with I don't know, 0.4, 5, 6, 7 going forward. But at some point, you just have to take the jump and say, this is a viable product now. You can do really serious work with it. We have customer using it in products. So it's the right time to just call it 1.0.
Now, going from 0.34 to 1, now, of course, that's a huge jump, but I'm just thinking, like, does that mean that now it's 1.0, so that means that I can actually rest assured that this is going to be good? Like, are you providing that kind of guarantee? Like, of course, numbering is, like you said, it's philosophical, doesn't really have a whole lot of meaning to it, but to the outside world, it does mean something. I'm curious if there's any kind of guarantees that were added on to it when you went from 0.34 to 1.0. Was it, okay, now we really have battle tested this thing. It's 100% ready to be out there for people to use. And before we were pretty sure, but not entirely sure. Like that, you know what I'm saying? You're smiling, but I'm just kind of curious about guarantees from the name change.
So it's not that much change in guarantees, I think. I mean, we say it's 1.0, so we have to stick with all the semantic versioning compatibility requirements going forward, which is way less the case in the 0 dot something space. But we are confident we can do that. We did put a lot of polish in the 1.0 release, so basically the last couple of weeks were just going over all the issues we had open and fixing stuff and making sure that all the small paper cuts are polished away for the 1.0 release. So I think it's a really cool product. It's really fun to work with. It's really simple to get into. We basically have a special language to describe the UI in, and we take that language and compile that into Rust code. So what you have on your device is pure Rust code, but you can still have the convenience of expressing UI in a way that feels more natural and is way easier to update, change, and maintain going forward. It also enforces a very sensible separation between UI and business logic, in my opinion. So basically have the opportunity to hand out the UI work to some other guy, somebody that's really good at designing UIs, do the UI in a language they can actually work with, and without them having to learn Rust first. So I think that's a really compelling use case we have there. And it scales down really well because in this compilation step, we already know a lot about the device we are targeting. So reduce image resolution, we can do a lot of optimization there. We can look at the glyphs you're using in your UI and strip. I have only those in the fonts. So all that to reduce the memory footprint. Something that would be really hard to do in a programmer in a programmatical way each and every time they change their UI. So I think it's a really cool approach we have there. And I think it's ready for 1.0. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but I'm just taking a look. I mean, you have 1.0. 1.0 was released on April 3rd, right?
Yes.
But I already see you have some unreleased changes. So will this be
Yeah, of course.
1.01? This would be a 1.1.
It will probably be a 1.0.1.
Okay. Yeah, because I do see
Yeah, of
some.
course you have changes. So we got a lot of feedback for the 1.0 release. So it hit some news sites and got way more users. Our GitHub stars went up by like about 2,000 by now, since April 3rd. So we got a lot of feedback. We had a lot of people with new use cases showing up and asking questions. And so, of course, all that input is going to result in changes in some way or another.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, like you said, did this bring kind of, I mean, let me ask you, was this a marketing ploy? Because it definitely worked in the marketing department.
At some point, version numbers are a marketing thing.
Yeah.
It's not, well, we accept that people are more interested in a 1.0 than in a 0.5 or whatever. But I still think we are ready for it. So it's not a marketing ploy, but it definitely helped with marketing.
Now, or was it a way to get more guinea pigs to test your software? Because like you said, the users shot up, right? And you got much more bug reports.
Yep, we did. It helped.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not guinea pigs because, I mean, it's 1.0, so it's stable. We have a company backing the whole thing.
The API is stable, not necessarily the system, I guess, right? Because I did see over here that you fixed the compiler panic, which is interesting. There's a couple of pretty serious bugs. Yeah, it happens for sure. So I think that's another thing to point out, right? So it's 1.0, it's talking about the API, not necessarily the stability of the crate, no?
I never had serious problems with stability, even in the 0.3 branch. So I'm not too concerned about that. Yes, we fixed panic in the compiler, which was some very special case that I've never seen before. And yes, it's great to have users that run into these things so we can actually find and fix them.
That's the funny thing. Like, whenever I'm following these popular libraries, they finally release a point, like a minor release or even a major. But before that, they have about 10 RCs say, please check it out. Please give it a try. Please put it in production. We know it's pretty stable, but we need more use cases. And then they say, okay, no bug reports now. Looks good. And they release it. And then 1 or 2 days later, okay, we got a 0.1 out, which is always like that, right?
Yeah, but nobody seriously tests RC releases. So
yeah.
If you're lucky, you have a couple of people that actually download it and build it.
I think it's usually the maintainers because everybody else is like, ooh, RC. Not too sure about that,
You always have some enterprise users.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's really few people. And only after you say it's ready now, people jump on it and you will get bug reports for something because it's just impossible to cover all the options out there.
Yeah. So we got the 1.0 and right, we started to talk a little bit about what was the differences between then and now. I mean, has there been any like big differences between when we talked last to now in terms of any features or something that you think really shines since then? I mean, I suppose about a year ago, maybe there's been so many things it's hard to keep track.
So the embedded story is so much better now. So it's so much fun to work with it. We did improve our tooling a lot. So we do have an online editor where you can actually type in your code and see it live. We have Visual Studio Code integration and an LSP. So if you don't use Visual Studio Code, you still have language support with highlighting. We also had that last year, but it did improve a lot in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
We have live preview. So while you code in your editor, you can have the UI in a window next to it, and you see while you type how it changes. So we do have, we spent a year of work on it, and it shows.
Yeah. It's hard to get these things to work, right? But you've had live reloading for some time, I believe.
Oh, we did. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that was one of the key features, I believe.
But still, it got so much better in the meantime.
It's hard to imagine it could get even better. I mean, has building it become any faster? Or it's about the same, probably? I think Rust getting building faster. It's been helping.
Yeah, that helps. And we also optimized our code a bit. So we should generate a little bit less code.
Mm.
But I'm not sure that it's really... Well, it's probably measurable, but I'm not sure that it feels any faster.
Mm-hmm.
So you played with Slint?
Sadly, I haven't. I mean, there's so many things I need to do every day. It's something that because I've done so much with Flutter every day. We're actually building a UI with Flutter. And I was just thinking, I wonder how it would be with Flutter. We actually had a really weird bug in Windows where you're clicking this button, but nothing was updating on the client's PC. I thought that was very strange. Not too sure how that happened. Never seen that before. And
feel free to reach out if you want to try it with Slint.
Yeah, I would love to, but I mean, I'm curious about how beautiful these UIs can be because, I mean, first of all, it's a financial client. So actually, their literal words to us were, it could look like my foot. I don't care as long as it's good. So it's something that I would consider. I don't know how close you can make these designs to certain UIs that we're trying to emulate. I guess you can probably get pretty close because they like these very black backgrounds, not sexy because it's too distracting, and white or burn your eyes orange text, so Halloween colors basically.
Well, it's really easy to do a highly customized UI.
Yeah.
The desktop integration parts where we basically try to emulate widgets, we have that, but it's definitely room for improvements there. We also need some more widgets.
Yeah.
But, well, we're making progress all the time, so let's see how it works out.
And you can, of course, do modals on top and multiple modals too, and multi-window support.
Yep, we can.
Oh, and that's getting more and more interesting, to be honest. Because I can imagine one of the things that they may want to do is like start to break out some of these windows into panes or panels out into windows. I think could be pretty interesting for them, because they literally have like 6 to 9 of these small screens at every single desk, so they might want to their positions on one window and then their trade blotter on another window, and that could be interesting for them.
Yeah, the dock widget is something we are missing yet. So all these dragging parts of the UI out and moving them around, that's something we don't cover yet. But we have people looking into that problem. So let's see how.
Ooh. I mean, if you have that and they're interested to use something like that, I would consider it, because that's something that Flutter cannot do, is multi-window support. But yeah.
Yeah, it's rare to see that outside of real traditional desktop UI toolkits.
Well, not many people actually use multiple windows, though, was what I found. A lot of people, especially in work environments, they just have one window. Programmers, designers, I think they usually have multiple windows, but a lot of people just get by with one window.
Yeah, but even those people tend to move around things in the UI, like move the pane with your emails.
Oh, yeah, that one too.
Somewhere else and stuff, and the editor in and all that stuff. So people use this kind of docking widgets where you can just move some part of the UI somewhere else. Yeah. But it's still rarely covered by UI toolkits nowadays.
Now that you mentioned, I do see this. I started playing around with Windows recently. And like you said, they have this way that you can, I don't know, would you call it docking? Is it called docking, where you can put a window on the left-hand side or right-hand side of the screen and it fills it up?
Yeah.
I guess it's docking. Yeah, so things have changed. I haven't really played around with Windows until Windows XP or maybe 7. I don't know. It's been a long time. So I was quite surprised to see that. I was moving a window around in Windows. What is that? Oh my God. What is that? Okay, that's interesting. That was my first thought.
Well, that used to be way more common with, let's say, traditional UI toolkits.
Yeah.
So all the old ones like Qt and GTK, they all support that. But the web world is seriously lacking in that area for some reason. I don't know why.
I'm also a little bit confused too, because I'm looking at your changelog and you put Qt renderer. Qt like the window management or the UI toolkit, no?
Yeah. So we can use that as a backend.
That's interesting. So you use Slint to design the Qt?
Well, we use parts of Qt, which are about rendering native-looking widgets.
Okay.
And use that to create our own widgets with that. We can also hook into Qt for accessibility support they have. They have basically a cross-platform API to interact with screen readers and all this functionality. That's been there for longer than Rust had SSKit, so that's what we used for our implementation.
Oh, here's a great question for you, which I don't remember if we covered in the last episode, but when we recorded, but you mentioned about screen readers, right? How's the accessibility in Slint? It must be something there, right?
We have that. It's not production ready yet, but it validates that we can actually add it.
Yeah, because what I hear a lot of is like, if you don't have that, then it's really a problem for a lot of people, right? But I guess it depends on your clients.
It's a problem for everybody that wants to have government contracts in most countries, or in many countries at least.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something we want to have and we need to have. Right now, most of our customers are in the embedded space and not that concerned about that topic.
Mm-hmm.
But that will definitely change, and we will cover that properly.
Excuse me. How about keyboard shortcuts?
I have not tried that. Good question. I'm not 100% sure
that would
how
be
the states there is at the moment.
For my financial client. That's huge, because they started asking me for that. Is there a way that I could just do a keyboard shortcut to do this and do that and do this? And tabbing around in the window, because I mean, when you move your hand from, I think you know this already, you move your hand from keyboard to mouse, you lose some time, right? So if they can do everything from text from the keyboard, they would love that.
I mean, you can definitely intercept the keyboards, but we have a convenient way to map them to something like commands that trigger something in the UI yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's definitely doable.
Those things would be really useful. Then I think you'd be in a really good state to get a good market share. So all of your clients, you cannot name who they are, right?
Of course not.
Is there any companies that you can name who you know who's using Slint?
We do have a couple of ambassador licenses out there. Mm-hmm. So basically you can get commercial license from us, basically replace the financial part with marketing opportunities for us. So I could name those, but I'm not aware of some right now.
Okay. I was curious if
Sorry, I'm just a programmer,
yeah.
I sit and hack all day long.
I was curious if there's, Microsoft or something, because you can sometimes see these emails that are making bug reports or whatever in the tickets, in the GitHub
Well, you
issues.
can check out our GitHub. So there's lots of people that reports bugs there, and they mention what they work on. So, but it's mostly open source people. So
Yeah. Since you guys started working on Slint, right, have you had any really interesting or difficult to solve like problems that come up? Like maybe you've seen people using Slint for something that you never thought about?
I need to think about that. That's a good question. We had lots of people approach us at trade shows about opportunities to scale down the hardware used to have to run UIs on. And that's apparently very interesting for a lot of industries where right now they basically sell a box with a couple of LEDs on, but they could just have a UI somewhere, maybe even a touch screen, and improve interaction with their products, let's say internet routers or I don't know what, that way. So that's something I had several people at trade shows ask me about.
About using it for demos, you said? Didn't quite
No,
hear
just let's say internet router. So
a router.
just have a small display on it that says I'm currently connected with this IP address,
Okay.
some graphics, traffic stats, whatever.
Okay.
Or maybe even just display a QR code like scan this to configure me or whatever.
Seems like a very simple thing. You could do that with HTML pretty quickly, or even just like QR code. I mean, it's doing the Photoshop.
Oh, you can do that with HTML, of course, but you can't do that with hardware for like a euro or two.
Oh, yeah. Okay, interesting. So it'd just be like plugging in like a Raspberry Pi or something simple chip, and that would just show up on the screen.
Have you seen the Raspberry Pico?
Yeah, I've seen some of them. I think Zero is the smallest one I've ever had.
It looks like this here.
Besides the board, yeah. Yeah, that looks like the Zero.
So that's a board. Yeah, it's a Pico, so it has 200 kilobytes of RAM. It's like €1, and the screen is 15 euros or something like that. And you can run UIs on that. I probably only have a development version here, so I can't really show that.
Oh yeah, the Pico, yeah.
It's a really tiny device, and it's really amazing what you can actually have UIs even with some form of animation on it.
Yeah, the Pi 02W. I think I have something like that. And then you have the Pi Pico. So the Pi Pico is even smaller than the Pi Zero?
Yes, it's
Okay.
Cortex M0 CPU. I don't know how big it is, but it has 264 kilobytes or something like that. Of course, no operating system, just bare metal.
Oh, really? There's no OS on this one?
No, nothing.
I thought all of these are supposed to have an OS that runs off the SD card.
No, it's a microcontroller. They are just
Okay.
bare metal devices.
Oh, I see. So the people can actually use that to power, like you said, a very small display.
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
it's not that much more expensive than a couple of LEDs or something, but it's just way more user-friendly to interact with.
Yeah. I see they're $4 US, but they're €1. Okay. It's not what it could be $4 to a euro, right?
Well, it depends on how many you order, I guess.
Yeah. This is available from $4, I guess. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't looked at Raspberry Pis in a while because I haven't played around with embedded space in many years. First, I wanted to make like my own beacon, and then I wanted to make, I don't know, a couple other things with it. And I got a screen and everything, like a POS system for a client. We never got very far, but that would have been kind of fun to do because the POS systems is such a scam. It's like they're really quite not very nice. You can make such a better one, but they are very complicated.
I have no idea about that space, sorry.
Yeah,
I guess it's heavily regulated, so it's probably
Also
not that
too.
easy as it looks like.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things I don't know about, but I just know that I just see people struggle with these POS systems and just wondering, there must be a better way to do the UI at least.
Well, you can do it with Slint. That
Yeah.
would at least scale down a lot.
This is true. You can definitely take a look at that. Okay, that's interesting that you can actually get a UI up and running on these microcontrollers. So then you'd have to compile all the drivers and everything else with it, no?
Well, the Pico has excellent Rust support. So you have the whole crate, which has drivers for that. You have a driver for the display we have connected there, which is connected over SPI port. And we basically set up a line buffer because you don't have enough space for a frame buffer. So you can only render one line and push that to the display, render the next line, push that and stuff. So it's a real fun environment to work with and really challenging to work with.
Sounds annoying, to be honest. I guess I'm doing print with Python is very simple compared to what I'm sure doing line buffering sounds like.
Yeah, it's one option. You can of course also use a frame buffer or use graphics acceleration when that's available. So on a desktop we use OpenGL and whatever else is available. But it also scales down to line buffers if that's the environment you need to be in.
Yeah.
And the thing that fascinates me about Slint so much is that we can cover the entire range with basically just one tiny bit of Rust code.
I mean, is there some low down things I can do when I'm working with Slint where I can get really particular about how certain things are done? Like you said, you're talking about the line buffering, right?
Well, you can implement it on basically any embedded device with good Rust support. So you can drive the entire event loop yourself if you want to. You can basically query the hardware yourself. So it provides us with a buffer and events that you got from whatever device you have connected in whichever way works for you. We will do the rest.
And you can work with touchscreens also?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Seems like there's so many things that Slint can do.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Well, I'm curious about it. Have you guys taken a look at some of the other UIs that are out in the Rust space?
Oh, we are looking, of course.
I mean, I think the biggest one at the moment is probably Tori. I'm sure you've looked at that one, of course,
Yes,
right?
that's web-based.
Yeah. Is there anything that you guys have gotten inspiration from or something that you've thought about or learned from looking at something like Tori or some of the other ones? Because Tori is quite different, right? It's really completely web-based, and they're using an embedded web browser that's in your OS.
So we did not look at Tori specifically, but we do, of course, look at CSS and all the web technologies. So we took inspiration from there. So if you look at Slint files, they look a bit CSS-y in places. So we also took inspiration from existing toolkits like QML, for example, which is something most of us worked on before we got into Slint. There are lots of inspirations. And we are always glad if some strong background in some other toolkit shows up and tells, oh, other toolkit does this feature better than you do. This is how they do it. And then we can discuss how we can improve ourselves.
Have you actually gotten people to come aboard and talk about, hey, there's this other toolkit that does something like this. I would like to have this feature or something like that?
It does happen occasionally, mostly in the chat, not so much on the bug tracker, because it's just more immediate. Yeah, sure, it happens.
How do you usually handle those kind of things? Do you actually take a look and maybe mark it onto the bug tracker? Or not necessarily a bug, right? I mean, when you say bug tracker, it's also tracking features too, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So do you actually add some of these features there and then you just prioritize based on needs or?
Oh, it depends. Sometimes it's just small things and it's just faster to just fix it and push a PR right away without a feature report somewhere. But of course, we also have feature reports in our bug tracker and prioritize those based on the impact we think it will have on users.
Now, has there been really good features coming in since 1.0 came out?
We had just today, we tweeted about a PR we had where somebody ported Slint to run in the AFI boot environment of PC machine. So you can basically turn on and just boot right into a Slint application with all the UI and stuff. So that was really cool. We had somebody working on virtual keyboard support recently, or that was Florian, our own guy. So that's work in progress and coming along nicely. Yeah, we have small things here and there. We had lots of feedback on documentation, of course, because that's the first touch point that people have when they try something out. So we did a lot of in that area, and we are still discussing how to improve that even further. Documentation is such a huge topic, and it's hugely important, and also a lot of work to get right. And it's hard to anticipate what people actually want to have in the documentation. So it's really important that we get feedback in that area.
That's a really good topic to lead into. Like, I'm curious about the docs since the beginning of the project to now. Has there been changes so that people can find this? Because, can they do this? Can it do that? Like, how do you guys handle this kind of situation if you want people to adopt it, but you want people to know what they can and maybe even what they cannot do?
So what we try to do is split up the documentation we had. So we have a book about the Slint language itself, which is mostly targeting designers and people that really develop UIs. Then we have another book about basically Rust integration and C++ integration, because we have bindings for different languages. So that somebody that just takes a Slint file and has to work with that person finds everything in one place. So we try to have different documentation for different target audience that we saw. So that's something we did for 1.0. And so far, it seemed to have worked out well. We probably need to add some more documentation, like something getting started section is a bit hidden right now. So we should probably make that more visible and similar things.
It's really interesting that you're targeting the designers, right? So do you find it difficult to try to make documentation for designers to build the UI?
I have not found it particularly difficult to do, but I did not get too much feedback on that section yet. So I'm not 100% sure yet how it worked out in the end.
Well, I'm curious if you can even get designers to even do it, because I mean, to them, it's coding. I don't know coding, and then they would just kind of back away from it as opposed to actually giving it a try.
Well, it depends on what you consider to be a designer. I mean, there's a whole range of people in that space. So you have designers that just use graphical programs and basically produce a bunch of pixels and ask people to implement them. And you have, on the other end of the spectrum, you have really, really technical people that do entirely web pages and web UIs on their own. So it's definitely easier to do a Slint UI than a web UI, in my opinion.
Well, I like that you guys have the Slint pad. That's really interesting. So that's what you're talking about, where people can just try out building the Slint UIs. This so reminds me of Dartpad, even the name. Is that where the inspiration came from?
Probably. Well, there are a lot of pads out there, so it might not be Dartpad in particular, but definitely one of those.
Yeah. It also gives me a little bit of a JavaScript Python-y look with this import from style.
Yeah, but that's, well, our language is not Turing complete, so you cannot really express business logic in it.
Yeah.
You can only, in quotes, you can only do things like align widgets based on some, let's say, parent widths minus 50% or something. So that's all we have there. But it's ideal for a user interface, and it also doesn't contain anything that we cannot that a compiler can't understand and optimize.
Yeah.
It also makes it very toolable, so we can have some more graphical tooling in the future. We're working towards that. We're not there yet.
What kind of graphical tooling are you talking about?
Like something like where you can just drag a button
into
your UI and move it around.
Yeah.
So that's work in progress. We're not there yet.
How about a formatter?
Yeah, something like that.
That'd be really nice to have, because sometimes you get some really nasty stuff everywhere, but then you have to figure out what's the right format to use.
Yeah, it's also interesting to visualize what you have. Like, where are the layouts and how do they interact with each other, all that thing. So we can do a lot in that area, and we're working towards that.
Yeah, it'd be really cool in this Slint pad to be able to put your mouse over a section and then you could highlight that part in the UI with a box around it, but I think that could be quite difficult to do.
Or you can click on that's on item or text or image or something that should highlight into relevant places in the UI.
On Slint pad? Because I'm just playing around with it right now. I don't in the preview window, right?
You just go to the text editor, click on image or whatever. I don't know what you have open there.
Slint
one of the
pad.
Elements. It should highlight the elements that you select.
No, I don't see that, but okay.
I don't see what you're doing, sorry, so I can't really
say
where you need to click.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like that's something that's quite useful for me in Flutter is like if I want to see why do I have all this space over here, then I can click this button and I can mouse over it and click on it and it'll make the code come up and show me.
That direction is still a patch on my hard drive so that you can actually click in the UI and then see in the text editor where you are.
Yeah.
That's still not in. I have a patch for that on my hard drive, but I need to polish it a bit. Or the other direction is...
You got all these magic bullets sitting on your hard drive, it sounds like.
Of course. I'm a developer. That's what I do. Do magic stuff.
So is there some special internal tools that 60 FPS has that's not released to the outside world in terms of, developing?
No, we're 100% open source. So everything we have, you have as well.
Except for the patches on your hard drive.
Yeah, but they will be open source as soon as I polish them.
As soon as you git push them or what? How are they sitting on your hard drive? They're branches, local branches?
It's a local patch that I'm working on right now.
You're doing an actual patch? You're not doing a branch?
Oh, I think I'm in a branch, but I'm not really 100% sure. It's not that big, so I might actually have it just on top of the master in the moment, and then I push it into a branch, and then
I see.
do a PR like usual, and then it will be in.
I was thinking about actual patch files that you can still send across, because I think with Git you can apply patches, and I think you can probably generate patches with your commits.
You can do that, sure, but you don't have to, and you don't want to if you don't have to.
I don't know. You may hold those patch files hostage. I don't know how things work. But when you say patch, I mean, that's really old school. People don't talk about patches anymore.
I'm old school, sorry.
I didn't say
I'm
it's a wrong
approaching
thing.
50.
I'm just surprised you used the word patch. I haven't heard that in a while. So I do remember,
Yeah.
I did work in a company that was actually sending around patch files. So I thought that was very weird.
Well, when I started, we were using CVS. So
Oh, okay.
in the good old days,
The good old days.
we did use patches a lot more than today.
You don't miss CVS?
No, not at all.
I've only used SVN. I haven't used CVS. I think SVN and CVS are very similar, though, right?
Those SVN is much better.
That's what I heard. It's better, but still not good.
At some point, we migrated over to SVN, and that was so mind-blowingly better. And along came Monotone, and that was also mind-blowingly better. And then at some point, Git was born.
No, you never tried Bazaar?
Not really.
No Mercurial?
It worked on a project using Mercurial for a while, but that never really was my favorite.
Yeah. I actually transitioned the company from Mercurial to Git because I was like, this is way too slow. It took forever to clone anything. From the repo was in New York City, I'm in Hong Kong, and I used Mercurial to have to clone code, and it took forever to go across the wire. But I used Git,
you
it
don't
was
want
like
that.
quarter time or something.
Yep.
Mm.
There's a reason why Git is so popular nowadays.
Because it's good, basically. And it's written in C, so it's really fast compared to Python, which I thought was ridiculous. Can't believe somebody wrote that Mercurial in Python. It's powerful, it's cool, but it's really slow compared to Git when you're going across the earth.
I'm not really sure that's because of the language, or whether that's
I'm
because
sure that was
of the
part of
language or
it.
because of the algorithms that were used. I have no idea. I've never looked into the details there.
I'm sure that probably had some of it because, I mean, no matter what Python is, I mean, this was also like 10 years ago or something like that. So it was really quite some time ago.
Yeah, of course. But on the other hand, Python has always been using C plugins for a lot of things. It was just a tiny Python layer on top. So it may or may not be the reason for it. Python may or may not be the reason. I'm not into that.
Yeah. Well, it could be. All I know is I just had evidence that there was a big difference and we switched and it was heaven finally. But yeah, I mean, it's looking really nice. I mean, there's still some things missing. Do you have some plans for your 1.1 release and what that would look like?
Not yet. We will see how that works out.
Seems like every release is like, okay, let's roll the dice and see what number we should use today.
No, definitely not. But we are really an open source project.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to plan in an open source project. I used to work on a project once. We had like 6 months of planning sessions with product owners and managers and I don't know who else. Like 5 days after we started, some guy showed up. Oh, I have this PR that implements this something, some useful feature that I think. And we so, okay, we just wasted 6 months of planning.
Well, it's a little bit too much planning, but I mean, you should still have some kind of idea, right? About when you want to cut a 1.1 and what that would even look like.
Well, it will be compatible.
Well, of course.
That's for sure.
At least relatively compatible.
Ember.
Mostly compatible.
It will have additions. It will probably have a virtual keyboard because that's almost ready to go in. It will have some other features.
Is there some like super annoying bug that is not quite fixed yet that's been there for a while that you'd really like to get rid of?
Not since we have 1.0. We fixed all those before we did the release.
Okay. I was just curious if there's some random bug. I mean, you did find the panic, right? So you said that was a little bit surprising to run into.
Yeah, but you cannot foresee what users will actually end up doing.
Yeah.
They will always surprise you. It doesn't matter how well you think you understood what they were doing. And any user visible part is API. And users will use that. And they will use it in interesting ways you have not thought of.
So what has been the most interesting thing you've seen that somebody tried to use the Slint API? In terms of, like you said, you were just so shocked and like was just confused why they were doing something.
Oh, we had somebody that uses models in a way that I had not expected people to use it. That was a bit interesting and that caused a bug. Nothing that special, actually.
There's nothing that you're completely blown away, like, wow, I never even thought about that.
No, not yet.
I feel like you're almost challenging me to come up with something.
Oh, feel free. I'm looking out for your bug reports.
You're welcoming the challenge.
Of course.
Otherwise, this is looking pretty good. I mean, I'm very happy that you guys have 1.0 release. I feel like 2023 will be the year of 1.0 releases. I think there was a couple others that just happened. Hyper, I think, got a 1.0 release end of last year. You guys have 1.0 this year. I think there's a couple others that were 1.0, or at least I think Ethics Web went 3.0 or 4.0. I think it should be 4.0 last year. So there must be more crates that are becoming 1.0, I think, at this point. But it's not coming to mind.
I mean, it's about time.
Yeah.
There's so many stable crates out there where
exactly.
people just don't want to do the 1.0. I don't know why. I mean, yes, it makes your crate more visible if you say it's 1.0.
Yeah. You get all the interesting bug reports coming in.
Yes, but I mean, all these stables that we have in the Rust ecosystem at 0.8 or 9 or whatever, they will see just as many users now as they would see with a 1.0. I don't see
Yeah.
that makes a lot of difference for those guys, for many of the crates we have.
True. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, like I said, I'm very surprised and happy to see it. I mean, is there anything with 1.0 for Slint that we missed and didn't talk about before we end? Because I think we've gotten really good overview about what happened. Basically, you've been stable for a while, and there's been more features, and there's much more features coming in. And because you went 1.0, you got a lot more feature requests, I'm sure, and more
Yes.
interesting bug reports, and things are looking better and better.
Yes,
It's really it, right?
that's my impression, yes.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, I mean, things are all looking positive.
I am glad that you got the same impression.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit shocked. I can't find anything negative so far other than, there's a couple of features that are missing, but where you guys have come from to now is already a huge step. And yeah,
Oh, it absolutely is.
and things are all looking pretty solid. So I'm happy to see that.
And it's so much fun to work with the Rust community. So open source communities in general. I mean, I've been doing that for basically my entire career, and it's always just wonderful.
Oh, I love it.
You do something, you get immediate feedback. You get people yelling at you if you do something that's not so great, and you have a couple of people that even praise you if you do something well. So it's wonderful. It's very motivating.
Yeah, well, it's good to get feedback, right? That's important, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully, they deliver the negative stuff in a not a negative way, right? They give you something constructive to work with. That would be the best way.
That's always the best, but even if it's just some people yelling at you on Reddit or I don't know what, even that is feedback that you must have done something right, that they got interested and actually tried it. So did something wrong because they didn't like it, but still it's feedback and it's motivating.
I'm sorry to end this on a negative kind of question, but now I'm kind of curious since you said that about Reddit, right? What has been the most, how would you say this? Is it destructive or like what has been like the not so friendliest community that you've released to or that you've kind of posted to and gotten feedback from? Was it Reddit?
No, it was not Reddit. I had some interaction with a project I contributed to where I
You don't have to name
some...
shame them, but I was just curious about the
No,
platform.
I will not. I won't, no. It was a C++ project.
Oh, okay. Do you know if it was specific? Was it like GitHub or was it, or you can't be too specific?
I don't want to be specific.
Oh, okay.
But it started with you effing idiot and went downhill from there. So
Whoa. Was there even a good message in that ramble or no? Like in terms of something that you guys really didn't get correct or what?
well, I was contributing, so it was one of the guys that actually worked at the projects. So
Wait, so you gave a patch to something for them and they
Yeah.
were not happy? It's like a Linus moment, no?
No.
Was it Linux?
No,
Was it
no,
Linus?
no.
Okay.
I never touched the Linux kernel.
Okay, I was curious if that's what it
I
was.
touched a lot else, but not the Linux kernel.
Okay.
So, I mean, I was a bit shocked. I left and I never went back. So, fine. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I've also heard that Hacker News is not the healthiest place in terms of getting feedback too. I've seen a couple of messages I was a little bit surprised to see. And I also, we had a previous guest on, episode isn't released yet as the time is recording. The cryptography library in Python switched to Rust.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And one of the messages somebody put down was, why do you idiots switch from C to Rust? Now I have to have the Rust compiler in order to run this crate. Can't you guys just learn how to use C properly? And that was their GitHub issue. I was like, wow, that's
Yep.
pretty
I
brutal.
mean, I kind of understand that. Adding a compiler toolchain is a big endeavor, depending on where you work or
Yeah.
what your environment is. So I do see that it's a challenge, but I also expect that the people doing such a switch are fully aware that they are putting work on their users and have weighted the pros and cons. So
Well, this is a good point that maybe we can touch on for real quick, is because you guys are looking at the embedded environment, which basically C run, from my understanding, for the most part, or at least C is a huge part of it. I mean, like you said, and like the other guy said in his comment, it's mostly C done, and whenever you have programming stuff installed, you're always going to have a C compiler. You may not always have a Rust compiler installed by default, right? So now you're
Yes.
requiring them to have a Rust compiler because Slint's done in Rust now. So, I mean, how has that been for companies to actually adopt Slint in their work? Has it been difficult or no? Because like you said, it could be quite difficult to add that to their toolchain.
yeah, it is challenging, definitely. Some of our customers actually use the C++ API we also expose. So all our code is in Rust, but we do have a tiny wrapper around the user visible parts so that you can actually use it from a C++ program and integrate really nicely with it. That works surprisingly well. And for them, it's challenging to have the Rust compiler in the toolchain, or at least for some of them. When we try to mitigate that by providing binaries for them, but that's not a solution that scales really well.
Well, our first guest we had on was the curl creator, and he said working with Rust code can be a little bit, I forgot the word he used, but I'm remembering him saying annoying, but I don't think he said that word. But at least it's not as, I mean, he was expecting certain things to happen in a certain way based on his years of working with C, where he said something like you would give it a reference or something, and then things would fail later on, rather opposed to if you did that same thing with C, he would actually have an error message much quicker than he would in Rust. I don't remember the specifics of what he was talking about exactly, but he just said, in general, when I'm going from C and I'm passing into this Rust code, which I did not write, I would get something weird. And it would get at a different time than what I'm used to with C. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really used C. I was doing C++ development for 20 years or so.
Yeah.
And it was challenging for me to switch over. It took quite a while to adjust my mindset. I also think it was definitely worth it because it made me a better C++ programmer while I was still doing that.
That's always the interesting part, is that one language will have to become better at another language based on the hostile compiler kind of forcing you to have good habits.
Yeah, so I had it like several times that I was saying, oh, Rust compiler, you're so stupid. I know this works. I do that for 20 years in C++ now. And then I was going, oh, yeah, if I look there, that's actually a problem. I need to fix that in my C++ code. Really embarrassing to do that.
Yeah, but it happens to all of us, right? That's why if we go back to the comment I just talked about with, why don't you just learn how to write C++ better? Even the best C++ programmers will run into issues. It just happens because there's nothing checking you, right? I mean, you can run these tools, but they're not 100% going to catch everything if you actually run the tools.
Yeah, even then, there's a lot of things that the Rust compiler catches that you cannot really catch simply because the language is designed in a very different way and with all the C backward compatibility that Rust doesn't have to care about. So it's really hard to enforce constraint in a language that's basically unconstrained. That shows. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, C and C++ are not the only ones. I mean, I remember showing somebody how to change a number to a string the old school JavaScript way, where you take an empty string and add it to the number. And they felt very disgusted. I said, what are you talking about? That's what we used to do in the 2000s. Now you have like backticks, so life is different.
Yeah, but something I want to say is that I really still appreciate C++, so it's not that I hate that language or something. And I appreciate how much Bjarne and the others have basically pushed forward the safety compared to C. That's why I used the language for 20 years. But nowadays, Rust has moved that frontier even more. I want to stay at the safe side as much as I can.
You're now a Rust fanboy, is that right?
Oh, definitely.
Well, I think we can end this on a positive note that, you're very happy to be a Rust fanboy and you're happy where you are.
Oh, I enjoy the Rust community a lot. I enjoy hanging out in meetups. I enjoy my coworkers. I enjoy the language. It's just a great environment to be in. Last year, I've been at my first Rust conference, and it was such warm community. It was just wonderful.
That's fantastic to hear. Well, I mean, it's cool that you guys are on 1.0. I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad you can come on to kind of talk about the changes from then till now. And not a lot, but that's probably good. And I'm good to hear that there's always more features coming in. And the product has picked up a lot more steam because of it. And so I hope this inspires more people to do, like you said, they're already stable. Why not just take the leap and just add the 1 in front? Let's actually,
yes, definitely do it. It's worth it.
Yeah, you should be the ambassador of 1.0 and get out there and let people know to go do that. Again, I just wanted to thank you for coming on, and maybe we'll have you back for 2.0. What do you think?
I would gladly be back. Thank you.
Thanks.